calm your mind. As I present to you, Dr. Cann.
Thank you so much for this awesome presentation of introducing me. Thank you, Marcia, for the opportunity for me to be here today and for me to talk about a couple of subjects that are just dear to my heart. I see that there's a lot of individuals here from Connecticut, some I know, some who probably know a little bit about me and my story, and I don't shy away from sharing my testimony because I believe that there are times that we go through trials, tribulations, through challenges, and we go through these not to hold on to when we get out from these trials and tribulations to ourselves, but for us to really share how mighty God has worked in our lives to give other people hope. So today I come to you, my God, I give you all the glory, all the honor, and all the praise to have all our sisters here and for us to hear not a word from me, but a message that you've asked me to deliver. So I say that I'm going to start by saying that I am a woman of faith. I have tasted the power of God. I have felt the power of God, and I walk by faith and not by what I see. And later on in my presentation, I will tell you why I'm starting my presentation this way when I say that I walk by faith and not by sight. So, as we're talking about mental health awareness, the number one question that I have, and I'll ask for some of you to chime in, is the question when we talk about our mental health. Is there such a thing as being normal? And this is a question that I'm posing. You guys can put it in the chat or people can chime in. Is there such a thing as normal? I don't want to pick on anyone, but I do hope someone can chime in and let us know what their experience is to this question. Is there such a thing as any one of us sitting here being totally normal?
There is a response in the chat. Normal is relative.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm trying to pull up my chat. Yes, normal is relative. Thank you, Sister Arlene. It is all relative, right? It's relative to what's going on in our lives. Whether if it's at home, we experience some stressors, whether if it's at work, whether if it's the mission that God has set forth for all of us to be able to give back to our community. So I totally agree, Sister Arlene. It is relative, and it's relative to so many different things. I'm going to ask Sister Shireen to put up the PowerPoint for me. Thank you. And I believe I saw another comment in the chat also, because I want to keep up. Relative to others too, there is a continuum, and the more normal is more like average. Bingo. I truly believe that because of all the stressors that it was very good, but sin has changed everything. Thank you for that comment. None of us are normal. All of us go through life with our trials, tribulations, with our traumas, with a lot of things, baggages that some of us are carrying. So I totally agree. You know, it is relative. And also, we live in a world that can be very sinful, and we can be influenced, you know, by what's going on. But what keeps us going, I believe, is hope. That's what keeps us going. That's what keeps, I keep putting one foot in front of the other. So my next slide talks about God sees you, and this beautiful song that we just heard, she ended it perfectly. He sees us. He sees the pain behind our smile. He sees us at our lowest points. And when we have a relationship with God, and we have that relationship where we can speak to Him and hear Him, all along He's telling us He sees us. This is one area that I am totally transparent in terms of really praising my God, giving Him honor, and giving Him praise, because I know He sees me, and I know that He sees you, even when we are all in pain. So, with that said, He has here is in Isaiah 61, 1-3, He said, He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to comfort all who mourn, to bestow them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. God always meets us at our lowest points in our lives, without judgment, but with compassion, grace, and healing. In my role as Chief Nursing Officer for Silver Hill Hospital, one thing that I can really say that we do very well is compassion. Always meeting our clients, our patients, where they are. It is not unusual for you to see one of our nurses sitting by the bedside, reading a bedtime story to our clients because they cannot sleep. Or if they are transferred to the hospital and they need something, one of our nurses leaving their home on a Sunday at 5 o'clock, leaving their family to go to the hospital, pick up something for our clients to bring them to the medical hospital where they were admitted. That's compassion. And when we show that compassion, I believe the more of the compassion that we give, you know, we don't give compassion to get compassion back, but when we give compassion with all our hearts, God returned that compassion in abundance. So my next slide talks about the weight that we as women, what we go through, the burdens, the distress. And I want to bring up some stories of people that we can possibly relate to. And I'll ask you guys in the audience, if anybody, if you can tell me, what is the common grounds between Viola Davis, Oprah Winfrey, and Maya Angelou? First of all, I should ask, do you guys know who these individuals are? And you can say yes, you can say no.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yes. Yes. Viola Davis, Oprah Winfrey, and Maya Angelou. So I'll tell you, all these women are women of faith, you know, women who really lived a life of following God's will. And I'll tell you a little bit about Viola Davis. She grew up in poverty. She grew up in trauma, feeling the emotional distress, burden. She talks about living in rat-infested apartment in Central Falls, Rhode Island, where she experienced a lot of hardship. She experienced hunger, bullying when she was growing up, This woman has tremendous emotional scars, a sense, at times, she has talked about a sense of unworthiness. But this is a woman, each one of them, God saw their faith and their belief and the relationship that they had with our higher power, with our God. And each of these individuals rose up to ranks that is just simply unbelievable. And what is so special about each one of them is that they don't apologize of the relationship that they have with God. We are talking about women, especially Viola Davis, who has won an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony Award. And this woman talks a lot about her struggles. And she even said she struggled with the imposter syndrome and the emotional burden of her past. Even with all her success and achievements, she continues to struggle with that. And why do that? Why bring that up? I bring that up to say that we all carry burdens. We all carry a lot of distress, and we all carry a lot of stress within our lives. And some of us may even feel that we are going through what's called an imposter syndrome, because at times we may feel that we are unworthy. But let me tell you today, each of us are worthy. Each of you who are here are worthy. If you haven't read this book by Viola, her memoir of Finding Me, where she talks about her faith in God. Very, very powerful. And she once said, I'll now claim my freedom. I'll now claim my worth. I now claim my life. I claim it. It is mine. And she talks about her testimony of resilience, of faith, of transformation, and how the power of God and compassion really restored her broken spirit. So I say to you, my sisters, if we have these mighty women that I just talked about, and if they could really go through the growth of having this relationship with God, of giving their burdens to God, coming to God and just being transparent in terms of their distress, and know that God has great compassion and God sees them. Each of us here have the same ability for us to do what they have done. And I'm so happy that they are using their brokenness, the weaknesses that they've experienced, for them to shine a light and give us hope as women, that we too can get through the emotional trauma. We can get through the daily pressures that we experience, whether if it's home, whether if it's work, or what God has set for us in terms of our mission within our community. And the mental strain can be very difficult, and we can feel burnt out. And that's all normal. That's all okay. But it's really what we do with how we're feeling and how we have our relationship with our higher God that's really going to help us get through that. The next slide talks about the way we go through that is really acknowledging our brokenness, and acknowledging that our brokenness is not a weakness. It's actually a strength. When we acknowledge all these particular struggles and the trauma that we face and the anxiety, the depression, the loss, the low self-worth, whatever it is, that's actually very powerful. And that's how we really stay strong. And that's how God continuously say to us, you know, I see you. Brokenness is not an end. Brokenness is actually a starting point to divine restoration. And at any point, oh, I see you. Yes, yes, absolutely, my sister. The next slide talks about God's healing touch. His healing touch includes wisdom. God gives us both spiritual and practical tools for us to handle the life stressors that we are experiencing day in and day out. And I think sometimes we get so caught up as women and all the responsibilities that we have, that all the tools that God has given us, we tend not to use it. And some of the tools, meditation. And even the Bible talks about the importance of us meditating. If you look at Philippians 4, 6 to 7, section 6 to 7, you know, God talks about prayer and meditation in the Word. For me personally, that's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning, and that's the last thing that I do before I go to sleep, is really meditate. Journaling, writing down our thoughts, our prayers, our affirmation. I remembered years ago, I wrote down in my journal, and I went, and every now and then I will go back and read in my journal. I said, one of the goals that I have, I ask you, my God, is for me to get my doctorate degree. And I spoke that to life, and I put that in my journal. And today I can say that I can call myself Dr. Immacula Cann, not because Immacula Cann did it. It is really through the strength of God, through believing and having faith that whatever's going on, He's going to carry me through, and He's going to make sure that I achieve this goal, because He had a greater purpose for me in terms of what He needed for me to do with that. Amen and congratulations. Thank you so much. Spending time in nature, spending time walking quietly in the Word, taking time to breathe and do gentle movement, deep breathing exercises through prayer, and really finding that creative space. I don't know how many of you here have what's called a war room. Did anyone see that movie, War Room? Yes, that is a powerful movie. If you have not seen it, I would highly recommend you see this powerful movie, War Room. And there's a question here that says, how do I meditate? I go to my war room. And that's really, I bring it all to God. I get on my knees and I say my prayer. Before I start my day, I say, my God, I'm asking you to guide my steps. I'm asking you to guide what I say. I'm asking you, God, when someone challenges me at work, put the right words in my mouth, put my mindset at the right space for me to be able to be effective, and for me to always be pleasing in your eyes. And that's my meditation at night before I go to bed. I look at myself in the mirror and I say, my God, I hope today I was pleasing in your eyes. So the serenity prayer, you know, has helped me, you know, for me to stay grounded. I love to dance. For a lot of people who knows me, they know that I love to dance. And that's another way to really help release the stress. But what's really more important, and we're doing that today, and that's fellowship. We are fellowshipping with each other, you know, sharing stories, not gossip, stories, stories and how we can just strengthen each other. And that is so important, that over the last 10 years, especially with what I have gone through in my personal life, I have made the decision that I'm going to stay around sisters who's going to really strengthening other sisters. And that is so important. My next slide talks about mental health and emotional healing through Christ. Oh, I see here, someone said here, Ruby Gardner, I love meditation. And I love that movie. Hi, Immacula, Ruby from GBS, my sister, I see you. Ruby and I go way back, and we used to work together. I've been blessed to work with so many powerful, wonderful sisters. And I'm so happy to see you guys here today. You know, there's a notion sometimes that, mental health, emotional healing, should only come through Christ. But God we already have Christ within us. We already have God within us. And what God has done is give us tools. And these tools are professionals like Marcia, who I've had the pleasure of working with, professionals like my sister Ruby, that I've had the opportunity to work with. These are tools because we already have Christ within us already. And he is asking us to use those particular tools that he has given us for us to be our best human being that we could be. So therapy and faith can coexist, and God can work through our professionals and prayers. And I'm going to use this opportunity to really tell you how God has worked through professionals in my life. In 2013, my husband had a massive heart attack. And what the doctors said, if he did not walk in that emergency room when he did, he would not be with us today. If he had collapsed in the parking lot, he would not be with us today. God was able to give him the strength for him to walk into the emergency room, and all he said was, "My name is," and he collapsed. Had a massive heart attack. He was in a coma for 20 days. They didn't believe he was going to be able to live. And I remembered when we got there to the hospital, after the 10th day, the doctor came to me and said, essentially, he said, start his funeral process. He is not going to live. And me, as a healthcare professional, I knew what he was doing. He was doing what's called a sternal rub, where when you put pressure on your sternum, and you put massive pressure on your sternum, and if you don't respond, that means you really have no life. And because that is so painful, you should be able to feel it. My husband was in a coma. He did not feel it. And what I did when he started doing that, and I knew what he was doing, I went and I grabbed his hand and I said, "Don't you dare." And I said, "You do your job and you let me do mine." And he looked at me and he smirked and he said, "Huh, and what is your job?" I said, "My job is prayer. And your job is that God is going to guide you and everybody in here. And my husband will walk out of this hospital." And 10 days later, my husband woke up from that coma. And a month after that, he walked out of that hospital. Praise God. And that's why I give him all the glory, all the praise, and all the honor. And when I tell you that I've tasted his power, I have felt his power. And through faith, through believing, and not only just through faith, through believing, it's also God, I believe, was using me to give the doctors, the professionals, an opportunity to see his power and how powerful he is through faith and through us believing in his power. So what he was doing was using professionals to do his work. And that's why it is so important for us to continue to give him the glory. The next slide talks about women. You know, women, that's in the scriptures, that's in the Bible. And I am not going to go through all of this, and I'm going to ask Sister Marcia and Shireen and the team here. Feel free to share my PowerPoint slide. You know, there's nothing here that I should not be sharing. Everything here is to be shared with other women, and for other women to see through the scriptures and how God have really restored and put so many women in wholeness, whether if it was Jesus, you know, the Samaritan women, whether if it was Hannah, whether if it was through the blood of Christ, where God, you know, we're touched by faith, and he made us whole through Luke 8:43-48. So these are all in the scriptures in terms of how God has touched women and how he has touched us through restoration. Yes. My next slide talks about steps towards wholeness, you know, where when we identify, yes, glory to God. I see you, my sister. Oh, you testify of big God. Yes, I love that. Each woman's pain began with pain, but ended with restoration. Absolutely. Each of these women experienced pain, but each of them really, it ended with restoration. So it's important for us to name that pain. What are we really carrying? And bringing that to, you know, to his feet. You know, when I get up and I'm doing my meditation, I say, God, I'm laying it all at your feet, and giving us the tools. He's giving us the tools, whether if it's through prayer, whether if it's through therapy, through rest. It is not a weakness if we are seeking therapy. It is a tool that God is giving us. Daily affirmation, a space for us to meditate and for us to be still. And really, the last and the most important thing is really trusting in God's timing. Because if I believed when that doctor said to me, for me to start preparing to bury my husband, and if I believed that, my husband would not be here today. And if you see him, it would be unbelievable. He is a walking miracle. You will never know that this man came from his deathbed, you know, coded 5 times, and 5 times was brought back to life. Every time he coded, he was brought back to life. That's a miracle. This is a person walking miracle. A few years later, in 2016, I almost lost my son. He had Guillain-Barré, also coded, and went back again through prayer, through believing. My son today, if you see him, you would not believe. This is a young man that lost all total function of his life, and today he is restored. So believing in God's timing, not our timing, but he is in control, and believing in that control. So my next slide talks about our sisterhood as a circle, you know, a declaration that we have to be at peace. A declaration is, I am not what happened to me. I am what God says I am. My mind is being renewed every day by day. My mind is being renewed. I am being made whole every day by the love of God. I am not what I've been through. I am who God says I am. Broken things in God's hand becomes beautiful. And each of us here today, we are all so beautiful in his perfect image. So that is the declaration that the next slide talks about how we come from surviving to thriving. We come from surviving to thriving because we are anchored. We are anchored in His holiness. We are anchored in peace and not panic. We are anchored in knowing our worth, not what people tells us what our worth is. It's our relationship with Him and knowing our worth. We are surviving. We are coming from surviving to thriving because we trust that God will restore us. And we trust that He's going to transform, remove the scars. And that's why it's so important when we have powerful testimonies, such as the 2 testimonies that I've just shared with you of my own personal life, that we share those testimonies because God has taken us through surviving, through the pain, and now thriving. It didn't come because I didn't believe. It didn't come because I didn't have faith. It came because of faith. It came because I knew that His healing touch will restore all that is going on. And I knew that I'm anchored in peace, and most of all, I'm anchored in His love. In His love, to see me continuously thrive. In His love, to see each one of us here, my sisters, each one of us continue to thrive, not just survive. So I leave you with a final word of encouragement. And to every sister feeling tired, anxious, or feeling invisible, God sees you, just like the song said. He sees you. He is near. He is our healer. He is restoring us. He's restoring us from our mind and body, our hearts. We just have to trust. Let Him be the one to really write our chapters from brokenness to beauty. None of us here are alone. None of us here are forgotten. You are not broken beyond repair. And I hope that this word, this final encouragement, will help and will touch. And I hope that I was pleasing in God's eyes, that I delivered the message that He wanted me to deliver to you today, because I believe that we all have our strength, but with His healing presence, with His peace, with His love, His compassion. Wow. World, watch out. We are mighty, mighty women. Thank you so much for sharing this word tonight. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be with all of you here. So I will take questions, and that's the end of my presentation. So I'll hand it over right now to our hosts and take any questions. Thank you so much.
So the
Amen.
floor